Despite a lot of recent media attention, we still know very little about what happens in the human brain after a concussion. And because of this, we really don't have good strategies for assessing recovery from these injuries. So currently, recovery is determined primarily based on the patient reporting that they are feeling better. Now, this has an important consequence because the physical symptoms after a concussion, things like headache and dizziness, these tend to go away within about a week after the injury. But there are impairments in movement performance, so slight imbalances while walking or running, that can last for months after that injury. So it's important to really focus on these impairments in that movement performance. We think that this is what is causing an increased risk of injuries in people after they've had a concussion. And it's a little known fact about concussions that for about 3 months after you're injured, you have an increased risk of any type of injury. So things like ankle sprains or knee injuries. Now, these impairments in movement performance are even worse when someone is performing a cognitive task. So for example, trying to remember your grocery list while you're walking through the grocery store. And these impairments are very subtle, so they're usually not noticed by the individual, but they can put them at higher risk of these injuries. And in my lab, we are trying to understand what leads to these impairments in that movement performance after a concussion. Now, the human brain has about 100 billion cells that communicate through electrical signals. During a concussion, there's damage to some of those cells, and that disrupts some of this communication. The function of the area of the brain that controls movement is mainly to send signals out of the brain to the muscles to tell the muscles to move. And we believe that these impairments in movement performance after a concussion are due to a lack of communication or a disruption in this communication between the brain and the muscles. So using measurements of the function of the area of the brain that controls movement, as well as different chemicals in the brain, we study how the concussion is impacting the function of the brain and impacting this communication between the brain and the muscles. We hope that this work will help to develop new ways to assess recovery from concussion, as well as develop new ways to aid in that recovery, not only from those symptoms that people experience like headaches, but also those that put them at higher risk of injury that go unseen. Thank you.